Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just talking about this kind of instrument, and I think everyone here, if you are familiar with Chinese music, you may be familiar with these so-called the Chinese orchestras that are built imitating the Western world symphony orchestras in the Western world. Before talking about these kind of important instruments, we have to start from the 19th century view of Chinese elites on Western music. They were amazed by the performance of Western music, and they compared it to the traditional Chinese music in the folk forms. And the Chinese elites hated them because they do not like it. They do not like it. And also, last but not least, at this time, many Chinese elite thinkers they want to transform Chinese people's minds because they thought Chinese people's minds are not suitable for turning China into a strong country. They want to use music to train the Chinese people's minds, and they find that the traditional music is not capable of fulfilling their such kind of aim. And Yanchen Zhang want to convert Chinese people to so-called new people, and that seems to be Orwellian. And I just looked up on the web that George Orwell was not born until 1903. They thought the traditional music pieces were decadent and are incapable of such aim. And this sentence, you can see what Yanchen Zhang wrote. I translated this, and these Chinese characters are the original text, and I made my own translation. And you can see on the right-hand side is insult for Chinese music. I think it might look like Adolf Hitler's attitude to so-called entirely Kunst, degenerate art in 1930s. The first call on reform is as early as 1903. You can just use a highly Eurocentric view. It says Eurocentric view. They just assume that European music is the standard form, and use it as a benchmark to criticize on traditional Chinese music. This is also recognized as something called a total Westernization, which remains an ultimate aim for some people, and that is not totally rejected. It is really acceptable to China. I think that can be because that the Chinese people are lacking their belief or religious tradition or somehow belief, so they can't just give up their culture when they find it is not the best. And Darwinism still has a high impact on our country's elites. It says reformers are necessary because it says cannot rival Western music. And these are the very famous people in China. And almost all musicians support such kind of reform. Huang Zi is a Westernized musician. A musician focused on the Chinese style Western music. You can see that the quotations. Even though some criticize the view of total Westernization like Huang Zi or He Luting, they still hate preserving and promoting traditional tunes. When I read the He Luting sentence, use some old antiquities to cheat others, I started to dislike him. We have a term 国粹, which is now a positive or a neutral, even positive word from 1980s is Chinese reform and reopening, but it is a totally negative word in ROC era. This is a very extreme case, but it might be very representative. It's by Xiao Yongmei, also a famous musician active in the 1920s to 1930s. He suggested that Chinese music should just directly use Western music. In this kind of view, why I say it's very representative? Because many Chinese musicians emphasize on the history of imports of foreign music in ancient times. But there is a huge difference between importing Western music and importing instruments in ancient times. The imported instruments in ancient times have experienced localization to adaptation to the local aesthetics for thousands of years. But Western music instruments cannot change their shape. It must not synchronize the shape and the performance with other parts of the world. Just take note of these kind of words, and this is maybe because of our country's realist culture. I think everyone taking note of this kind of history must be aware of the cultural difference between Western world and China. We are having some musicians are having a compromise solution, changing the shapes of performances of instruments. I said this, you can say in that period, in that era, it's a compromise, but I think it's very reluctant to say so at the time we review it in 21st century world. These are some early examples, starting from 1920s. Zheng Jingwen established Datong Music Society in 1919, and it established the earliest big ensemble of tens of people in the form of present-day Chinese orchestras in around 1930. Here are some instruments he imitated the Western instruments it created. From him on, the Chinese people are very keen on creating the bass bow instruments, just because in Western symphony orchestras, many bass bow string instruments like the cello and the string bass are used. And he also created another shape, a new kind of qin, intended to increase the volume, right, breaking the tradition of entertaining a small group of literatis. Although this kind of qin is obsolete now, in 1970s, during the Cultural Revolution in mainland China, from the 1960s to 70s, mainland China, even more radical changes to qin has happened. Then from then on, the silk strings were changed to metal and nylon strings, and was continued to use till present. However, in the new kind of qin in the 1960s and 70s are also obsolete now. He created these kind of new pipa. The left-hand side picture is using a traditional fretting. However, the one on the right-hand side is using new 12-tone tuning, but using Pythagorean tuning, not equal temperament. Then he even created a large se with 100 strings. And from this, traditionally, se uses the bridge, moving the bridge left hand side, right hand side to tune. However, from this se, the tuning is using the text in the right hand side, conceal the right hand side, open and use the tuning peg like the piano, the one used for piano to tune. And this kind of tuning method is now still used in guzheng today. Now is the famous figure Liu Tianhua. He shaped the pipa and erhu we use today. He learned the violin during his young age, and he borrowed many things from violin to erhu. For example, he radically increased the finger positions from around only 2 to 3 to 7 to its maximum limits, to imitate the violin. He then turned frettings to a pipa using equal temperaments, which is commonly accepted system. I think we can say even some pipa or erhu players are being traditional cannot just leap out from Liu Tianhua's settings. we can say to some extent, the other thing about setting is the hand of the Buddha, 如来佛掌心. In 1930s, the nationalist government of China, in the nationalist China rule, the KMT party established Broadcasting Corporation of China and established the first official Chinese orchestra in Chinese history. Then this kind of style was inherited by PRC. It created these kind of instruments, and I found these descriptions in a book published in Taiwan in 1970. You can say the shape is becoming bigger and bigger just to imitate the bass tone of cellos and string basses. Now I have to introduce another figure that is not famous, Zhang Zirui, who died around a little more than 1 year ago. These are the instruments he invented. This is Donald Trump's official visit to Beijing in 2017. Here are the instruments. The sheng that needs human blowing and use pedals that he invented in around 1960. I pointed out it's the official report in mainland China said it was something how ancient it is, but I pointed out that fact on the Weibo, and my friend of mine just said, in this kind of case, just don't mention that. This is maybe also invented by him. I don't know why they just imitate that explicitly and imitate the cello so explicitly. It is called the la ran, bounce stretched ran, literally. He also invented 4-string wuqing, maybe 3-string, 4-string wuqing like this in the 1970s. It is also obsolete. It's also obsolete now. And then in this slide, this instrument is obsolete now. But in this slide, the instruments are still used in Chinese orchestras. I think these are the most important figures of this part of history. The consequence is that the benefits, it improves the sound effects because it is more harmonized. It's more appropriate for the frequency. So that the large ensembles, rather than the small traditional ones for a small group of people entertain themselves, can work effectively. So that they can perform in the concert halls, modern concert halls, we build like in Western countries, designed for Western symphony orchestras. Therefore, they can perform to mass crowd each time to make more people know about these instruments in such kind of culture. However, from decades ago, there have always been sounds of skepticism, especially in recent years. Last year, in 2017, a famous hip-hop player Chinese hip-hop player in the United States, Wu Man, said this in an interview of her. She said this kind of instrument reform, maybe something in Darwinist music reform, is the reason that Chinese Han-Chinese music cannot go into the insights of the world as easy as the instruments in the music culture of Chinese minorities like Miao or perhaps Miao or Zhuang or Uyghur. And Wu Man just pointed out because some of them must turn Western so that they do not have distinguishing features on stage worldwide. she also pointed out some problems in the problems of mainland Chinese youngsters. Because mainland Chinese youngsters are not, I have read on the web, are really not uninterested and do not have an understanding of traditional cultures, do not have a comprehensive understanding. Therefore, on some mainland Chinese websites I have found, they are having some prejudices. They use their own values to judge Westerners in other parts of the world. Because they think they don't like it, and they don't believe other people in other parts of the world will like it. So they don't believe traditional cultures can be exported worldwide. They only believe that so-called modern cultures like Japanese manga or something else can be exported. Wuman is here pointing out that the Chinese traditional instruments with westernized properties are performing many modern music pieces welcomed by mainland Chinese youngsters. And Wu said that is the problem. It's just very Western, does not have their own tastes. They do not hear the traditions genuinely. And she pointed out, everything must have their own characteristics. If they already have such a kind of things, why bother listening to yours? If this is by Tian Qing, a mainland Chinese musicologist, and is 70 years old. He's 70 years old now. Look at his description of this part of history. He just said using half of their lives doing one thing. He just said that the thing you can say has failed. I said already used in my slides. I already said it's an effect of Darwinism and scientificism that led this progress. He said the show was made bigger and bigger, and like what I mentioned in the last slides. It says shown even like the organ. And Tian just asked, why don't you just play organ? As these was added keys, why don't you just play the flute and so on? Here, this is, and maybe Tian does not know that many Chinese elites really do want to do so. Just recalling this slide. And then she also talks about the characteristics problem. If Chinese music do not, in 21st century, if we have the Westerners in other parts of the world want to see about special characteristics. If Chinese musical instruments lose their own characteristics, then few people, rather more people, will hear to us. This is the problem. I think this could be a culture rooted in the cultural difference, and that which leads to the difference in the values. Thank you.
We have a question.
Sorry. Does anyone have a question about anything to that?
I was wondering what your view was on how these improved or changed instruments are received in China nowadays.
I think the instruments perceived in China, now these instruments themselves are welcome, but I don't know. We just cannot know how the instruments would be welcomed if we had not done such reforms. We cannot know that because that kind of instruments are maybe they have already disappeared. Those instruments without so-called reforms may have already disappeared. So we cannot know whether they will be welcomed.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I just wonder, I remember you're talking about the quote from Xiao Youmei that like there are flutes, there is only like 6 holes, and then so the idea should be a complete westernization, that will be more efficient, like from 6 holes to like 20 holes or something. And so what about the current idea? Are they thinking like the holes like just doesn't matter, like they just get rid of the social Darwinism, or they will think more like we should add more hole, which is good, but we need to add more holes by the Chinese way. Like how does the current thinking is about?
Maybe in adding more holes. Maybe the flutes were added holes before, but they have become obsolete now. These instruments I think they have been given up.
Okay.
One point which you kind of alluded to a lot was the difference in orchestral settings. Is there any examples of non-orchestral settings where the instruments have still been altered?
Non-orchestral settings. I think the strings, the instruments are altered just for mainly for the orchestration. They're together. They are one single historical progress.
Any more last question?
Yeah. We saw that the erhu, you changed the string to steel strings, and you said they modified the se to have a lot of strings. But why did the guqin not go through the modernization?
Guqin is we use since 1970s in guqin have been using have stopped using silk strings to use steel with nylon strings in mainland China.
Okay. Right.
But the musicians have found the shape. The shape that's not welcomed by qin players, and that's why the changed shapes have become obsolete. The traditional qin structure is still used now.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That marks the end of our short paper session this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming.